Headlines, read all about it, baby. Headlines. That was for those of you who remember that hit by Midnight Star way back in the day. But hey, even if you don't remember it or you've never heard of it, that's okay because we're going to be talking about headlines and how to keep your stress level down when you look at them. And we're going to do that in just one moment. Hi there, it's Marcyline, and I am your host for Stress Talk Live. I'm so glad that you joined me today, and I'm glad to be with you. We're talking about headlines, and I want to give you a little bit of background as to why this topic is first and foremost on my mind right now. It's because I found myself looking at the headlines on social media, on the news feed, and I rarely go into the content. And so, what happens with me is I'll read the headline and then my heart starts boom, 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 beating real fast. And I get stressed because of certain headlines. I start feeling some kind of way. And I wondered if other people were feeling that way too. And as I was looking into information about this, I found the answer to that. So, we're going to talk about headlines and we're going to talk about how to mindfully break free from headline stress. Because, yes, there is a thing called headline stress. So, we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. First thing I'd like to remind you, though, is to like, follow, and subscribe to ML Bailey Consultants on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. That's where you're going to be able to see the replays of this and other live stream broadcasts. Okay. Next, here is the tap link. This is where you're going to find lots of resources. And guess what? There's a new resource. Yes, I am building a Substack. Yes, I am. I'm building a Substack, and it's called Days That Matter. Remember that, Days That Matter. Go to this tap link and you'll be able to read the first post. But of course, this Substack is in progress, so I'm just building it. But the first post is up. The second post will be up some point this week. And then finally, this is my website. And I have so much going on, I have to update it. But you will find lots of information about me and the services that I offer through my private therapy practice. So, what are we talking about today? I gave you a little bit of information. We're talking about how to mindfully break free from headline stress, and you have to know the psychology, right? You have to know the psychology behind headlines, how they're written, why they're written the way they're written, and what it is that draws you in. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background, a foundation of that psychology. And then from there, I'm going to talk about what it is about these headlines that causes us to feel stressed. And then finally, I'm going to give you, some tips that the American Psychological Association, the APA, has suggested. And I may add a few of my own as well. So let's get into it, okay? All righty. So, I'm always looking at notes. Today my notes are here, but I'm going to try to move them over. So here we go. So I'm going to put them in front of me, so I'll be looking down instead of left, right, or right, left, left. I might go back to left, right. We'll see how this works. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about the science behind these headlines. So there is a science to marketing. And those of you who are marketing majors, you know this. There's a whole psychology behind how things are marketed. For example, just a simple example. Um, if you watch the soap operas, which my mother does, she watches the soap operas, and on those soap operas, there are certain commercials that come up. And those commercials, because I've sat with her and watched some of the soap operas with her at lunchtime, those commercials are geared towards a certain age group. Now, they know that a certain age group watches these particular soap operas at these particular times. And so they gear those advertisements towards those age groups. Another thing is they gear products towards certain people too. When I was a kid watching soap operas with my grandmother, I remember seeing um, advertisements for laundry detergent because at that time a lot of women stayed home, and they worked in their home. You know, they did housework, they cleaned and washed clothes, and so a lot of those advertisements were geared towards women who stayed at home. Well, with advertise, okay, let's take another example just popped in my head. So cologne, when we look at cologne or advertisements for cologne, cologne is usually advertised by beautiful, stunning looking people. I mean, people who are young and about this big and very svelte, trying to say the word, slim, but they're very attractive. They're sexy. They have this aura about them, right? Because the idea behind that is that if you buy the cologne and you use the cologne, of course, you're going to transform into the person who was advertising it, right? Yeah, no, you won't. But the idea is, hey, you will feel as if you have some of those qualities, and that may attract people to you. Okay. So there's a whole science behind it. I am not an expert, but I do know a few things. First, when it comes to advertisement, when I'm sorry, when it comes to headlines, headlines are supposed to grab your curiosity. They're written in a way that you will think that, hey, if I look at this article, or if I look at this, if I look at this information that the headline is talking about, then I'm going to gain knowledge that I didn't have, or I'm going to fill in the gap that something is missing from my knowledge base. So headlines are written in a way to tease your curiosity. You will often see headlines written in question form, right? My headline is written in a question form because it makes you think, well, how do I do that? Right? Or it's supposed to make you think that. How do I do that? How do I break free from headline stress? That's something that I need to know. So it teases your curiosity. There's also a way to write headlines so that if you had to incite your urgency, I don't want to miss out on this. I want to know this. I want to have this. So the idea of fear of missing out, or FOMO, FOMO, is FOMO, is that if you look at the content behind the headline, then you will not miss out on something that's important. Another part of psychology that's used in writing headlines is emotion. Emotional triggers are often used. Headlines are written to shock you, to get you excited, to cause you to have fear, right? That's what we see a lot of in news, in the news feed, in our social media feeds, especially during what? Right before the election, during COVID, during the COVID pandemic, during all of those things that were happening, we saw a lot of headlines that triggered emotions in us. And they were written deliberately to trigger emotions, because if we're fearful, then we're driven to act, right? We're driven to do something. Another excuse me, another thing that headlines use, and this is part of the science I'm talking about, are power words. The secret to learning, a proven method. This is the ultimate guide, right? Those words that make you say, aha, it's a secret. I want to know that secret. Or it's a proven method. I've got to know what that is. I need that proven method. Or it's the ultimate, meaning there's nothing to that can compare to it. So there's a whole science behind that. And again, headlines are written to trigger our curiosity, to give us a sense of urgency, to trigger our emotions, and to make us think that we're getting something that will empower us, as in it's a secret, it's proven, or it's ultimate. And I don't want to get into SEO. That's a whole different beast. But headlines often use keywords. And again, I won't get into all of that. But there is a part of this psychology where keywords are also used to get us to pay attention to that headline. So when you think about the headlines that you are looking at, whether it's in the news, whether it's breaking news, that's another thing. Years ago, we rarely saw breaking news being flashed, right? Now it's every hour. There's a breaking news, and it could be something quite minor, but it's breaking news. That also is a sort of headline. But when you think about it, think about the headlines that attract your attention or elicit emotion from you. And think about if it has some of these characteristics that I've talked about, that I've shared with you. So let's talk about why these headlines are so key and what's happening with us. Well, there was a study in the it was published in actually last year, November, by the in the Journal of Nature Human Behavior. And this study showed that 75% of the people who shared posts on Facebook did so without even clicking to read the content behind the post. They just looked at the headline. 75% of the people. Now, this study only looked at Facebook. And so we can only really say 75% of Facebook users, right? But think about it. There were also some other studies, some other research that was done that also suggested that people only looked at the headlines and they didn't go into the content. So when you think about that, when you think about how the headline is written, and you think about the content that has more information, but people don't get past the headline, what do you think happens? What happens is, more than likely, we take what the headline says as the truth or as fact without going into the content to actually get more information. So, how does that affect us? Well, first of all, we're already stressed about the news. We're stressed about the things that we're hearing. The APA in 2024, that's the American Psychological Association, published information that said that 40 to 70% of Americans are stressed due to current events. So we're already stressed, right? We're already feeling the we're feeling pressured by what's going on in the world and in the country already. And so when we see headlines that touch those points that we're most concerned about, it's going to do what? It's going to trigger emotions in us. And those emotions can be fear, it can be frustration, it can be shock, it can be disappointment, it can be a gamut of things that we're feeling just by looking at the headline, just by looking at the words in the headline. The other thing that causes us to feel stressed is that we often have intrusive thoughts about current events. And so we're constantly thinking about what's going on, what's happening in the world. And because we have a 24-hour news cycle where you can get news 24 hours a day, you can get it every minute of the day if you choose. It causes us to focus on that information. Well, the news is interesting because we don't really know what is being, if something is being reported in fully, or if only parts are being reported. When you think about a 30-minute news program, there's only so much time in that program. So they have to give you what they consider the highlights and not necessarily give you everything, the whole story, or all of the information or the explanation. So we have in our mind these thoughts about what we've received and what we think about it. And we just think about it over and over and over and over again. That increases our stress level. We also have a lot of emotions that I just talked about related to the news and what we're hearing. Disappointment, anger, resentment, anxiety are all related to how we feel about what we're hearing and what we imagine is going on in the world. There are those of us, too, who are obsessed, and I'm using that term, y'all, who are obsessed with the news. And not just the news, but what we see on social media, what we see, because a lot of people get their news and their information on social media. Our daughters are in their 20s and they don't watch the news at 6 o'clock or 6:30. They get their information from social media. And I'm here to tell you that social media uses all of those techniques that I shared with you. We're trained to use. People who use social media for business, for other reasons, we're trained to use the science, the psychology when we are crafting headlines. So, social media, and again, social media, most people do not go into the content and read it. Most people look at the headline and then they pass it on, they share it. One of the studies that I looked at suggested that this is one of the reasons that misinformation was so prevalent in the 20s, what is it, 2024 election. I couldn't even remember. In the election, because people do not go in and actually read. They just click, they didn't click, they just sent it on or they reposted, but they did not read the content to even see if it was legitimate, if it was factual, or if it was saying something other than what the headline said. So that is very important for us to know exactly what if the headline matches the content, especially when it comes to news and information. So I've talked about the science behind headlines and how they're written. I've talked about how news is stressing. It's stressful, and how headlines are designed to increase that stress because there's there's a need for tension so that you will act in a certain way. And that action may be going in to read the content, although very few of us do that, or reposting, or forwarding that information, forwarding the post to someone else, which most of us do. So, the purpose of this stream today was to talk about how to mindfully break free from headline stress. And I shared that I talked about how we need to know the psychology behind it. So, I'm going to share with you suggestions from the American Psychological Association. And these suggestions are things that you might know, um, or you may not, and you're learning it today with me. Yay! Okay, first and foremost, slow down the process. Slow down the process of your brain. When you see a headline that evokes emotion in you, especially if that emotion is anger or frustration or disappointment or fear, because all of those emotions will increase your stress level. They trigger the stress response and it increases your stress level. So you want to slow the process. And how do you do that? One way is to write it down. You can write the headline down and then think about, what is it that's causing me? What's really behind this feeling that I have right now? The other thing that you can do is read the content. Go into the article or go into the post and actually read what it says. Read it to see if the headline was misleading, or if the article provides additional information that makes the headline not seem as menacing. So slow the process. Write the headline down and just think about what is causing these feelings. What's behind it that's causing you to feel what you're feeling at that moment? Or read the content. Read the content. I have found that I've looked at headlines that have caused me, like I said, my heart to start beating fast and hard, and I can feel my muscles getting tight, and I'm getting anxious. And then I've gone into the article only to find that, oh, this is not new. They're just saying something that happened like 5 years ago. Or, oh, this is nothing. They're not saying anything. They're just, this is nothing information. Or, oh, yeah, that's what happened, but then this happened to counteract it, right? So read the content. The other thing that the APA suggests is that we just turn off our news notifications. We don't have to get every bing, boom, bump, bump, bump to know that, there's breaking news or something is going on. We don't need to know that Mrs. Smith swatted a fly in her kitchen, right? Um, so turn the notifications off, your news notifications off. When you're checking your social media, use a timer and limit the time that you're on social media. It's so easy to get caught up scrolling, especially if it's something that you like. But if you are someone who, you're looking at it and you see other stuff, set a time limit. Because the moment you click on a post in social media, there's going to be 5 or 6 other posts that are similar because of the algorithm. They're going to jump up on your feed and cause you to want to look at those too. So set a time limit. Use the timer on your phone to go, okay, let me get off. Okay. Another thing that you can do is put your phone down at dinner time or meal time. Have that rule for your family. It's good to do that. I know we used to talk about how way back in the day, we used to put the TV on and watch the news at dinner as a family. That was something we did together. Well, one of the things that did is we had an opportunity to talk about it at the dinner table if we chose to. But now, with our phones and with social media, everybody's looking at something different and it doesn't facilitate conversation. So have no screen time. Do that not only for your meals, but set a no screen time at other times of the day for yourself and for your family. And last but not least, the American Psychological Association suggests that if headlines are causing you to feel anxious and stressed, and if the news causes you to feel anxious and stressed, if what's going on around you is causing you to feel anxious and stressed, then connect that anxiety, connect that stress with some form of action, whether that is making a donation to a particular cause, whether that is joining a group of like-minded individuals, whether that is doing something to help you relieve the stress that you're feeling or the helplessness that you're feeling. Connect that stress and anxiety with some form of action. So, we have just talked about what? How to mindfully break free from headline stress. You have to know the psychology. I started by sharing the science of writing headlines and what's behind it and why the headlines grab our attention. I also shared with you research that talks about how the news is stressful and stressing us, and how headlines are designed that way to evoke some form of action so that um, we act in some kind of way, right? I shared with you information about how we tend not to go into the content. We look at a headline on social media post and we just send it or we repost it without actually going in and reading the content to make sure it's factual. Next, I shared with you a number of things on how to manage the stress you experience from these headlines. And those suggestions are from the American Psychological Association. Those of you who are on my newsletter list, you will get a PDF with the content that I've just shared, a summary of what I've talked about, as well as a downloadable PDF so that you can review it and hopefully it helps you during the week. Well, there we are. This is it. We're saying goodbye for now, but I'll see you again next week. I'm Marcyline Bailey. Take good care.